until we accept the grief and the loss, until we process it, we can't move forward because we're just kind of running from something at that point. The thing that I thought would end me ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. When I was 18 years old, when I felt hopeless, when I was strung out, when I committed a robbery and unlawful wounding, which is basically harming another person but without malice or forethought. In my case, it was shooting 2 people. I thought my life was over. When I was arrested, and when I was sentenced to serve 32 years in prison in a state that didn't have parole, thinking I was going to be in prison until I was 50, I knew my life was over. Like I said, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me because it was the first thing in my life that was able to stop me, to really slow me down, put me back in the present moment. Because growing up, I actually had opportunities, and a lot of people never did. But I didn't feel like I deserved them, or I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like fundamentally somehow I was wrong, and therefore the world wasn't going to work out. So when I felt hopeless, it wasn't that there were not things in front of me or possibilities in front of me. It's that I didn't feel like they were for me. I felt like, yeah, maybe they would work for other people, but they just fundamentally weren't for me. But stopping, losing everything, because I did not have much at 18 years old, but lost what I thought was my future, lost what I thought was going to college or creating a career or having a family, and it gave me perspective. Suddenly I recognized what I could and what I couldn't do. The reality was, even in the best of cases, I couldn't control the future. I couldn't control what was going to happen. I could only control my plan, my actions, and then my reaction to what happened in the world. Sitting in jail, and later sitting in prison, I started making those decisions. Started deciding, hey, I want to read. I remember reading as a kid. I grew up an only child out in the woods in the country. I used to love, that was my escape. I would read or I would go wander in the woods. Couldn't wander in the woods while I was locked up, but could read. So I poured myself into one book after another, and for 19 years I read 2 to 3 books a week. I read fiction and nonfiction because I wanted to grow. I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to have experiences. I wanted to have thoughts, but I also wanted to learn. So I would balance myself. I'd say, okay, if I read one good nonfiction book, then I can read one really entertaining novel. And it gave me the perspective that even when I didn't feel like it, I had the discipline to make sure I was learning. I was studying new things. Recognized again that I wasn't in charge of most of the things that happened. Because if we went on lockdown, or if something shut down, or if we got commissary, we didn't get commissary, all those things were out of my control. So suddenly, I stopped focusing on all the things outside of me and expecting them to bring me happiness or them to make me okay. And like visitation, I loved visitation more than anything. Getting mail and getting visits was the time that I felt most human or most alive or most connected, the most real, if that makes sense. Like, remember the Velveteen Rabbit, like, I feel real? Well, I couldn't control that. So there were times when my grandfather came to see me, they stopped him, they strip searched him, an 84-year-old man, and then denied him a contact visit. And I was angry. I was as angry as I have ever been at them, but also at myself, because I recognized that if I had made the decisions I made, he wouldn't have been in that position. But ultimately, I knew I wasn't in control. I couldn't control what they did to him. I couldn't control what he chose to endure or chose not to endure, because the other thing was, he could have refused that strip search. They didn't have the legal authority to make him do it. What they told him was, if you don't consent to this strip search, you may never be able to see your grandson again. So what he did out of love for me. Again, that made me hate myself that much more because I had created that position or created that situation. But what it is having lost everything, having been in a place of hopelessness, having been in a place where I feel like I have no control because I don't have any control, because none of us actually have any control, I recognized what mattered. And that was the people. That was the time we spent. That was the way we treated each other. And I recognized that, you know what? I went to bed hungry plenty of times. But I never died. It was never too little food to live. There were plenty of times where I was bored out of my mind, but out of that boredom came this kind of incredible creativity, this opportunity to see the ways that I would come up with creative solutions or solve problems or, I don't know, work with new things. The point being, all the things that I was afraid of that I somehow thought were disastrous, like going to bed hungry or not having enough or being bored or being locked behind a fence, humans are adaptable. And that's not just me, that's actually everyone. We don't really start adapting until we learn that we can adapt. It's kind of like the Phantom Toll Booth, except I guess the opposite. Phantom Toll Booth, they were only able to do it because they didn't know it was impossible, so they did it anyways. In the world, we believe that adaptation, we believe that surviving these things is impossible, so we don't even try. But if we begin to believe in ourselves and our resilience and our ability to overcome, we can overcome anything. And I hope people don't have to go to prison to learn that. It's one of the reasons I wrote my book, The Best Part of Prison. One of the reasons I do a lot of the speaking I do, a lot of the coaching I do, is because I want people to know without having to go through the downside or the prison side. 19 years later, having earned a bachelor's degree, having become a journeyman electrician, having helped start a peer support mental health program, having written articles for publication, having mentored, having tutored, having done everything I possibly could, the governor decided I was a good risk and granted me a conditional pardon. You got to consider from a governor's perspective, they have no political win to give somebody a pardon. Because if I had gotten out and done something terrible, it all would have been on him. But I've gotten out and I've done some wonderful things. I've started a nonprofit. I've done a lot. Nobody has talked about him. Nobody has given him an award or put him on the front page of the paper for giving me a chance. He only would have gotten any press if it had gone bad. So he took a risk on me. He believed I was worth risking on or betting on. It's the middle of COVID. I'm in my late 30s. Been in prison my entire adult life. Basically have nothing to rely on. But I do have a network of people that I built while I was in prison, friends, family, community, and I have a reputation. It may sound crazy saying that I had a reputation from prison. The reality is people knew they could rely on me. That every time I had said I was going to do something, I did it. That every time I said I would help someone, I did. That if I said I was going to read a book or write a letter or write a paper or advocate for something, I did. And that was worth gold. Because a lot of people in the world get distracted. And they're too busy or things are too hectic, so they don't do those things. They don't follow through. So just being a person who did what I said was worth its weight in gold. So I got out, but again, didn't really have anything. I mean, was lucky, had a little bit of money in my books, had a place to land, had a place to go, and had to figure out how to be an adult in the world in the middle of COVID, in the middle of all the chaos. So I just started saying yes to everything. Because I learned while I was on the inside something that somebody had actually told me as a kid, but I didn't really understand. And that is that we can make all the plans in the world, but plans get foiled. Like plans get run into complications, or we blow our knee out, or something doesn't come through. But every decision we make in our life either creates more, or creates fewer options for us. So if I prioritize making decisions that create more options for me, I'm gonna have a lot more options open in front of me. That's what I did for 19 years. So I got out and I had a world of opportunities, a world of options in front of me. But again, hadn't been out of prison for so long. Literally had to fill out a resume that was my prison jobs because I hadn't worked a job in the outside world since I was 17 years old. Like, what was I going to tell people? I used all those things. I managed to navigate. I actually took a big risk. Sorry, there was someone on the trail and I felt a little weird talking to my gimbal while I was walking by somebody. Turns out they had actually lapped me on the trail, and I'm not sure how that's possible, but science is weird sometimes. Anyways, I took a risk because I did get a really good job offer. I could have gone to work for one of the big institutions around here. It was funny because when I filled out that resume, they didn't know that I had been incarcerated. I just put down that I worked for the Department of Corrections because it seemed smart. Like, okay, I worked doing this and this and this. And in the interview, they were like, we just got one question. Like, what made you leave the Department of Corrections? Like, it's a really good job. They got really good benefits. Like, why would you want to leave? And I stifled a laugh and I was like, well, sir, I was actually incarcerated there. This wasn't like a voluntary job. This was a job I had because I was incarcerated. And all three people on the panel kind of like choked up and looked at each other. One of them actually said, well, do you still want the job? As if them being confused would somehow make me want the job less or want to rely on, opportunities less. Either way, it was just another example of saying yes to things and trying, because there were plenty of job applications, plenty of job interviews that I did not get a response from or did not get a positive response from. But I just kept putting them in, I kept talking to people. But I took a risk because at that point I'd only been out for a few months. It took forever for them to get back to me. And I realized I wanted flexibility. I was doing social media, I was starting to get some speaking engagements. I wanted to be able to move around and go around and do different things. So I turned down that job and I took a 1099 job that had no benefits, had no basically anything other than flexibility. Because like I said, every decision will create more or fewer options. That job would have given me stability, would have given me benefits, but it would not have given me flexibility, so it would have given me fewer options. From that, I managed to build. And I was really fortunate that Courtney and I were able to buy a house. Now, that relationship didn't end up working out, and I actually ran into some problems that I saw because when we bought that house together, it's not an issue. Nobody checked my background, nobody asked me about information. We signed on the dotted line, we gave them a check, and we bought the house. When we broke up, and we both moved out of that house, I started getting turned down after turned down when I put in rental applications. Put in a rental application, pay the fee, nope. No response, or a negative response, or sorry, we've gone with another candidate. Which happens, but sometimes it happens so much that it seems very clear that it was about my criminal record, not about me as a person. So despite the fact that I had good references, despite the fact that I had enough money, didn't matter. What ended up giving me the luck was there was a local landlord, a private landlord, who was just on Facebook Marketplace. He said, all I want to see is proof of income and 3 references. So I said, I'm going to get the 2 Commonwealth's attorneys, the 2 prosecutors for the area that I live in, for the county and the city, and the person that I used to live with, because I lived with somebody in town for about 6 months, wouldn't even actually let me pay rent. It was just this incredible situation. Put them all down as references, put my proof of income. That was it. He rented to me. I assumed he had done a background check or looked into me. Assumed he decided to give me a different chance. And I thought, great, second chance housing guy, this is great. Turns out I was wrong, because about a year later, I actually did a presentation at his church. I get a text, and he says, hey, Jesse, I had no idea. Do you want to get coffee? This is amazing. I wish I had looked you up earlier. We didn't end up actually getting coffee. He's very busy. He runs 3 businesses. But I remember thinking, you never know. And you never know until you try, because he may not have been. He probably wouldn't have been open to renting to me if he had known my history. But it was worth trying anyways, because he didn't check. And a lot of times people don't check. I was able to rebuild and restart with basically nothing but a prison reputation and a prison network, which doesn't sound like much. So when we talk about all the challenges ahead of us, I regularly get people that reach out, and some are facing really serious loss, and some are facing loss that does not seem that big in the scheme of things. I talk to people who've lost family members, people who've lost jobs, people who've lost relationships, people who've lost their homes, and often what they say is, I just don't understand, why would I keep moving forward? What I tell people is not, oh, well, you just got to keep going and it'll be okay. I tell people to really feel that, sit in that, really soak that up, because until we accept the grief and the loss, until we process it, we can't move forward, because we're just kind of running from something at that point. But just like I did when I was in prison, you really sit with it. You really let it just overtake you, crash over you like a wave. Eventually you get tired of sitting in it. Eventually it becomes enough. You're ready to do something else. That was it for me, because, yeah, definitely in the jail, in prison, I gave up. I was defeated. But laying there didn't kill me. So I had to do something, and I didn't want to just keep sitting there feeling sorry for myself. So eventually I got back up and I started going. That's the way I look at it today, because everybody is talking about economic collapse and how bad things are and how bad things will be and how bad things could be. And I say, you know what? I'm learning to trust in myself. Because if I could do it, if I could go into prison at 18 years old, 150 pounds and scared out of my mind, and come out a better, stronger person, 19 years later, okay, I could do it. If I could come out of prison in the middle of COVID with nothing and be a homeowner and be successful and do a lot of things after that, I could do it. The thing is, you can too. We tend to think that it's the people and they just have some characteristics or qualities that we don't have or that we don't know how to have. It's just little steps. It's little habits. It's things we do day after day. So if you get up, you do something for yourself, you do something for your neighbor, you do something for your partner, do something for someone in your life. If you get up, do something for your body, do something for your mind. If you go to work, you work really hard at whatever you do, whether you're sweeping floors or flying planes. If you show up and you find gratitude, you make a list every night of things you're grateful for. If you look at opportunities and you choose the ones to create more options rather than fewer. If you do these things over and over and over, these little tiny steps, guess what? They lead to a place we never could have imagined. Because I am, again, in a place I never could have imagined. According to the judge who sentenced me that day, I should still be in prison. I would still be in prison for years. But I did enough little things day after day after day. The governor granted me a conditional pardon because he was willing to take a bet and say that I was useful or more useful to the Commonwealth of Virginia outside of prison than in. He's willing to apply for jobs where, yeah, most people didn't call me back. Most people didn't hire me or offer me a job, but some people did. And I was willing to show up, knock on doors, and make phone calls and send emails, most of which have never been answered. Or most of which have definitely never been answered affirmatively, but some have. Now I have a network, now I have opportunities, and now I have a life, because I just keep going. But again, that doesn't start with this you just gotta keep going even when you feel down. Sure, that works if you can do it. But if you're feeling down, it's okay to feel down. It's okay to acknowledge that, to really let that soak in. Because once we lay down, once we really feel sorry for ourselves for a little while, like I said, we get tired of it and we start doing something else. Once I got really tired of it, I was ready to do something different. So today is the day. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. I hope you start with something small today. I hope it leads somewhere huge.